can trust that the system will police itself, because what we know is that the system simply doesn't do that.
And I think it's just important. I mean, speaking of Charlie Hale, our mayor, right? Keaton was stopped for quote unquote looking like a gangster, right? Which means having his hood up, Trayvon, right? And being in a car that they somehow thought he couldn't afford. That's what it takes to look like a gangster, as we know. We know what looking like a gangster is code for. It means being a black and brown youth, right? And I think it's incredibly important because what happened afterwards is everyone tried to make this a mental health issue.
Yes.
And Keaton had mental health concerns, but he was not stopped for mental health concerns.
That's right.
He was not stopped for any action he took. He wasn't acting erratically. He wasn't threatening people. He was stopped for, quote unquote, looking like a gangster, right? That's what he was stopped for. He was executed right here in this street for being a black youth. That's the bottom line, period. And Charlie Hale, 2 years ago, during the OPB mayoral candidates race, he called Keaton a gang member. He said, yeah, and a gangster shot Officer Burley in the leg, right? Even though he had all the facts. But he said that during the mayoral election. So that's the mentality.
You know that Keaton was never involved in gang activity.
That's what So I think it's important. That's the mentality of the folks who are making decisions about how police get deployed, where they get deployed. And we see the same things happening again and again and again, because the reality is the system is not broken. The system is working exactly as it was intended.
Right.
And we have to begin to shift the way that we talk about that, or we're never going to actually fundamentally change this system, and we're never going to get justice for our loved ones who have been taken.
Well, how do we defend ourselves against this system?
Well, there are things that we need to know and things we need to do. The first thing is you guys showed up tonight. This is more people than we've seen at this vigil in quite some time. But you took the time to be here. Earlier this week, I said what it was going to take was for comfortable, white, middle-class America to realize that there is a problem in America. And the problem is that we have built a militarized police force that is totally out of control.
Yes.
And no matter what city you live in, no matter what community you live in fact, Portland Cop Watch just released a report of all the police-involved shootings, and I'll have him come up and talk about it in a little bit. But it shows that this is not a Portland problem. It's not an Oregon problem. It is a national problem, right? And so I will make sure that Dan has an opportunity to tell you about this report, because there's no county where you're immune, especially if you are young, you are black or brown or poor. If you are a houseless person in this community, you have as much rights as an African American, which is none, when it comes to police in this city. And so one thing I want to say before we tell you how you can get involved is that this was a good week at City Hall. I had the privilege, and I see some of my colleagues out here, of being part of a group of 150 some people who marched on the mayor's office. And we chanted outside his office, "Bring Charlie out," because we thought that the mayor, when 150 people show up at City Hall, we actually thought the mayor should come out and actually talk to us. And needless to say, he didn't come out and talk to us, but he did talk to some people to start a dialogue about really what's fundamentally broken. Since the death of Pete Notice, the Department of Justice has come to town. They've investigated Portland Police. They have found they violate the constitutional rights of people who have mental illness or who are perceived to have mental illness. Now, they were invited to town to investigate what was happening to black men at the hands of the police. But the Department of Justice did a bait and switch when they got to town. And they gave us two reasons why they did that. One, you may know that in the federal courts, you cannot bring a case of racial discrimination unless you can prove intent. You can thank the United States Supreme Court for that. And you may remember that the only reason New York was able to finally stop and frisk was because some brave police officers started recording their roll call instructions to go out and stop black and brown people aged 14 to 24 under their stop and frisk policy. At the same time that the Department of Justice came to town, Portland Police rolled out a stop and pat program.
Which they said was not stop and frisk.
Which
Because they
said-
changed the word.
Right. It's not stop and frisk, but here's how it was supposed to play out. Portland police officers would be required to spend 15 minutes engaged in community policing each hour of their shift. But in order for them to feel safe, in some communities, they would have to pat people down before they got into the 15-minute dialogue. And so I asked the mayor and the police chief, how many downtown white business owners are you stopping and patting?
Right.
Because downtown Portland has the highest number of concealed weapons permits in the state of Oregon. They couldn't answer that question. How many do you think they stopped? I don't think they stopped anything.
Zero.
But I can tell you there were a lot of black and brown boys stopped and patted under the guise of a 15-minute community policing conversation. A lot's going on right now. We're in the process of putting together a community oversight advisory board to implement the settlement agreement that the Department of Justice negotiated with the last mayor, Sam Adams. And the committee will be made up of 20 people. 5 will be non-voting sworn police officers. 5 will be appointed by the Human Rights Commission and the Disability Rights Commission together. 5 will be appointed by the city council. The mayor and each city council member has an appointment. And 5 will be appointed by a community board who will be receiving applications. The application just came out yesterday. This will be the vehicle, I believe, for really fundamental changes to how Portland Police operates, depending on who gets appointed to the oversight board, right? Everything depends on whether or not there are people in our community who are willing to invest the time, which I estimate to be about 15 to 20 hours a month, in reviewing information, doing analysis about whether or not the police are doing the job that we hired them to do. It's going to be a short timeline. I think the deadline is January 15th. I'm sorry? January 9th. Very short time period. It is available online.